I want three teams that you think have to make a move by the trade deadline if they want to contend for a championship or sort out the direction of the team or whatever the
Mhm.
reasoning may be. Which team is at the top of your list? Which team is it
Yeah,
imperative for them to make a move?
I have three teams that are all in contention for the title.
Hmm.
And the first one is going to be the Phoenix Suns. Now, they don't have a lot of draft capital, as we know, but I do
Hmm.
think, as currently constructed, they need some help. They need either another player to put along that front line to add some physicality to help them be a better rebounding team, or if they could get a guard, they could play downhill. We talked about it on our last broadcast to kind of take a little bit of the responsibility off of both Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, who have both done a nice job to this point with it. But I still think you're going, as you get further into that playoff mix, you're going to need somebody to play that way. So they stand out to me. They have a couple trade exceptions, kind of mid-tier trade exceptions, around $6.5 million. One is 6.5 million. I think the other's about 5.8 that they could add. They can be players in the buyout market. But
Can
again,
they?
this
Are
new
they not a
no,
luxury
but no, I'm
tax
going to tell
team?
you, no, yeah, no, they are. But I was getting ready to
Okay, okay.
expound on that. They can be, but if a guy has making more than $12.4 million pre-existing salary to being bought out, then they can't jump in with that guy. But if there happens to be a player who's at that level or below this bought out, then they could look at signing that player. So those are the ways
Yeah.
they got to try to get better. And I think they have 3 second-round picks as well that they could to try to utilize. Not a lot there, but I think you got to try to get creative because their window is now. And,
I,
let's not sugarcoat it. Their window is right now.
I think that the trade exceptions you mentioned are absolutely key for them because when you look at their salary sheet, they've got three players in Booker, Beal, and KD who take up max salary slots. And then aside from really Nurkic and Grayson Allen, everyone else there is pretty much on a minimum deal. So it's going to be hard for them to make these moves. And even if they do, they can maybe make one, maybe two at a push.
Right. Mhm.
So we're gonna have to see how that goes. But who's the second team on your list?
Second team on the list is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now
Hmm.
they just made a big move, obviously, in changing the coach. So they brought a championship coach in to the group. But I think they've got to address the elephant in the room. Look, we know when the trade was made with Dame Lillard coming in and sending out Drew Holiday, that you got a better offensive player in by far, but you got a subpar defender in as he relates and stacks up next to Drew Holiday,
To
who
put
was
it
an all
nicely.
defensive player. Exactly.
At least stacks up next to any other guard in the league.
Exactly.
Let's just call it what it is.
But as you know, again, as front office, you got to look at this thing. Who's playing next to Dame Lillard? Malik Beasley has been their starting two guard this year. And really, this is his first full year of being a starter. I think he's always been best suited as a guy to come off the bench. He's not known for his defensive prowess either. He spaces the floor, he can shoot threes, but I think he could do that as well on the second unit with this ball club. Somehow, can they use their limited resources to bring in a player again? Look at the buyout market. They just like Phoenix can't be in that upper tier buyout market. The guys got to have made 12.4 million or less. But can they get somebody in that realm or trade one of their existing rotational players for another player who brings a defensive component to the backcourt? Because my problem with the Bucks right now, yeah, they made a change with the coach, but what hasn't changed is that your point of attack, and BJ can speak to this, your guards are your point of attack defensively. And if you're subpar at both positions defensively, that's problematic. And as great a coach as Doc Rivers is, that's going to be a challenge for him as well. So again, that's why I put them as my second team.
Solid, solid pick. How about the third team on your list?
I'm going to go down south and I'm going to go to the Dallas Mavericks.
Okay.
Yeah. I like this team. You know, obviously they have two high-end stars with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. But I think they need to get a third player, a wing player who can create more offense. And again, they have a little more capital than those other teams we talked about. I think they could trade either their 26 or 27 first round pick, maybe package that with one of their bench players and see if they could get that type of player who could help take some of the load off of both Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So those are my three.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't have either of those three teams. BJ, who have you got?
Well, I think those were excellent teams, and I think Scott made excellent points, and I agree with all of his teams, actually in the order that he stated them. However, I want to point out some other teams that I think are going to have to address. One being the Denver Nuggets.
Okay.
I think listen, they have an elite player in Jokic. However, their depth is missing this year as comparing to last year, which allowed them to get those 16 wins, which eventually, for them being crowned champions just a year ago, they're missing Jeff Green and they're missing Bruce Brown. And I think they're going to have to figure out how to shore up their bench. I think their starting five is terrific. However, you're going to need those timely contributions from someone off the bench. And both of those guys, Jeff Green and Bruce Brown, they were terrific for the Denver Nuggets just a year ago. So I'm looking for them to maybe add something that can help them get a little depth coming off their bench. Second, your Boston Celtics. We've been saying that all year. We've been talking about what they're going to do, Mo.
Yep.
And clearly, without adding a piece, I think they currently now, as is, they have the best record in the league. Let you tell it. They are the last team in the league. If you listen to Mo, he's picked them to lose every game. But we've all caught on. But I think they will be very active to look to add the right piece for this group. And so I think that's one of the teams. And then I kind of have a debate. And, I'm, as you guys know, earlier in the season, I picked Sacramento to kind of do something. I think Sacramento. However, but I'm going to say Philadelphia.
Okay.
I'm going to say Philly. I think Philly right now, Joel is playing guys. He's playing. I don't know if he can play any better. I mean, what he's doing offensively. I mean, this guy's averaging over a point a minute. I think it's now the time. I think they've always felt this. But when you see your star player, an MVP, playing at this caliber, I think it puts pressure on the organization to say, we better get this done. Because I don't know how much longer he can continue to play at this level. Is this a 2 or 3 year process? Is it just this year? So I look for them, if the opportunity presents itself, for them to make a move, because I don't want to be on the podcast if they lose in the first or second round. Because Mo and the rest of the world is going to go. I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to go beyond. So I think right now,
round, make
they're
my
gonna,
day.
But yes, they're going to look at. I think they're forced to now, especially the way Joel's playing. And I think Tyrese Maxey for the first time will be an All-Star. He will be named an All-Star this year.
Okay, but you then have a school of thought of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I mean, they're playing great basketball right now. How do you evaluate that, Scott?
Well, I think BJ used the terminology, the right move. I thought about them as one of the teams, but I also look at them as a team that could be heavy players this summer in the trade market, and they're going to have some cap space. So they probably, to get the ideal fit, it will occur then. But who knows what happens in the next couple of weeks. So I think you got to be close to the phones and see if something does arise that's going to fit in with that group. I said this the other day when I was doing another podcast in New York. When you make a trade, especially a mid-season trade, a couple things are at play. You're not only getting the basketball player and his talents and his statistics that he's registered to that point, but you're getting the person and personality. How does that guy fit? And you have a very short window to make that fit and work when you're doing it in season with just a couple months to go before playoffs start. So I think they have to be very careful if they were to do something right now. Not to say that I wouldn't, but it's got to definitely be the right kind of person
Would
as
it-
well as the.
Would it be a
the
third
player fit.
star, or would you be looking for more of a depth piece?
It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be a third star. It's just be a third good player that can. I think it needs to be a wing player who can score, create some off the dribble, and then also not sacrifice your defensive integrity. That's what they would need to find to add to that. So it doesn't have to be a superstar player. Look, they've got the guy who may be a repeat MVP right now. The way he's playing, he's got to be the leader in the clubhouse. BJ just mentioned Tyrese Maxey. It probably is going to be a first-time All-Star. So you got 2 All-Stars in the building. Get you another really good player. And if he happens to be All-Star, great. If not, that's not the end of the world to me.
So the first 2 teams BJ mentioned, Boston and Denver, they're kind of in similar boats. They've got a great starting 5, maybe Boston starting 6. But then their bench is a lot of guys on rookie contracts, a lot of guys on minimum contracts. How do you, as a front office, look at the trades? Because, BJ and I went through some proposed trades earlier this week, and a lot of them involved combining those salaries in order for a better player to come in and come off the bench. However, when you're trading out 2, 3 guys in exchange for 1 guy to make up the salary for him, you lose depth by definition because it's just less bodies. Although you
Right.
may have an increase in talent, you're losing the amount of bodies that would potentially be available. And then for different matchups, you lose different skill sets.
Well, I think the importance when you talk about combining players to bring back 1, nobody should know your roster better than you as an executive. So if there's a player on your roster currently right now that wouldn't be included in the trade, but would be bumped up because we traded out 2 guys ahead of him, but we're confident that this player can help us win basketball games. He just needs time, and you can go ahead and roll with it. That's part of your job as an executive, of really knowing your team inside and out, whether you can handle a 2-for-1 trade at this time of year, because you're saying that 1 player is going to add a certain value that you think makes you better, and then you've got someone currently on your roster that you really, and I don't want to say roll the dice, but someone that you have evaluated and said, you know what, with extended opportunity, I think, I've watched him practice, I've watched him get opportunities in games. He's ready to take on a bigger role, and you got to go for it. That's part of roster building.
Well, it's nice that you 2 both picked teams that we have in the contention bracket, and later in this episode, we're going to get to our true contenders. But the 3 teams I picked are teams that sit outside of that contender status, who I think need to make moves to get into that realm. The first one, as I mentioned when BJ was giving his, is the Sacramento Kings. Last season, they finished 3rd in the West. Currently, they're sitting 7th in the West. And last season it was exciting, making the playoffs for the first time in however many hundreds of years, and then lighting the beam and whatnot. But they've been kind of stagnant since then. And when I look at their team, I just feel like they could do with an upgrade, especially with, the way De'Aaron Fox can play. I would like to see them get an upgrade, and especially looking at their roster in the Western Conference, if you've got to go through the Nuggets, I don't know if playing Sabonis at the 5 is the way to do it. When you look at building championship teams now, when you look at the Bucks, when you look at the Nuggets, I'm thinking I would rather have Sabonis as my 4. So I'd be looking to make a trade if I was the Kings. What do you guys think of that?
Oh, very good team to mention, and I think should be actively looking to add toughness to this basketball team. I don't care what position is at, but more to your point, I see a need on the front line. Because look, when you get into playoff basketball, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And it's going to get down a lot of times who's the more physical and who's the tougher team. Because I'm not going to let you play to your first option consistently throughout a series. I'm going to force you to go to your second and third counters in terms of what you're running, from an offensive standpoint, and each individual player, I'm going to try to force you out of your comfort zone because we're locked in. And so as I watch this team right now, I don't see a team that is very physical. When teams play them physically, they struggle with that. And they're not the best defensive team either. So they can score with anybody. And I love the ascension of De'Aaron Fox, and I love how Sabonis is playing. That's a great two-man team, but I think this team has to add some toughness. So I like that pick, Mo.
BJ, you almost picked them as well. So what would you kind of be looking at from a Kings perspective?
Well, I thought last year they were just terrific. They took the lead by storm in the way they played. They were the fastest playing team in the NBA, and they committed to that. However, what has happened is now I think teams now have been able to scout them. And I agree with what Scott said. They're going to have to add toughness, and not a guy that has to come in and suddenly you want to fight and do all that.
Right,
When I say
right,
toughness, like you want to look for a guy who's going to do all the dirty work that's necessary. Loose balls, set screens, take on the opposing team's best interior, exterior player, whoever they identify that can play their style, their brand of basketball. So I think they're going to have to add a certain amount of toughness of someone that can come in and contribute to this current group as is without taking away. You're going to have to give up something to get that player. However, you want to add a component to your group that's missing.
Right.
And I think that they're going to have to figure out, and that probably will be a current starter, I would imagine. There will probably be a guy that's in their top 8, let's just say in their top 8, that they're going to have to probably give up and add a player who's going to have to give them a dimension and bring that to this group that they currently don't have. And I think that will carry them a long way, because if there's one thing that is missing, and I agree with what Scott said, is that they're going to have to add a level of toughness, because that's not what they do. They didn't grind many games out last year just because they didn't play well on the offensive end. And if you're going to win in the playoffs, as we know, you're going to have to figure out how to get stops in order to win some of these games in a 7-game series.
I like that. The second team on my list is the Golden State Warriors. If you're going with Steph Curry and Clay and Draymond, then you got to figure something out, because right now, what's the point? Are we just going to be happy with these guys riding off into the sunset as a playing team? I mean, you guys have got some young guys over there in the Bay, and I understand you want to keep some guys for your future and this, and that. But come on, if you're going to go all in fully. Don't be half in, half out. So I got the Warriors there that if I was them, I'd be looking to make a move. I see you laughing, Scott. Why are you laughing?
I think with the Warriors, what we're trying to do, we're trying to get them. we're talking about them from 3 years past or 4 years ago, when all those guys were younger, pre-Clay injuries, all those things. This group has aged a little bit now. And to expect them to get back to who they were, those three, as a collective, I don't know that that's very realistic. And there's nothing against any of them, because I love them all, and I think they're all terrific basketball players. But if you're Golden State, I mean, this kid Kuminga is playing great right now. I wouldn't be giving him up, because you got to play, there's going to be a lot of basketball to be played in years to come. He's playing extremely well. He's fine. It seems like he's gaining his confidence, and is going to be a player in this league. And they're another team, like the teams that I mentioned and the teams that BJ brought up, that have limited resources to go make a big trade that's going to make a difference. In my opinion, Golden State, I don't know that there's a move to be made at the deadline that's going to put them in the hunt to be a champion. I think they've got to just be evaluating the remainder of this year and get ready to make their splash moves this off season. That's my opinion.
Okay, BJ.
Well, you see, we talk about this every week, but let's talk about it one more time. I think we need to say this. The move that has to be made with every championship run is the following. At what point do you break this up? At what point? Like, you want to respect what this group has done, and I think they've earned the right to play it all the way to the end. Well, guys, we're about at the end now. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, when you, as an executive, and maybe Scott can touch on this, at some point here, you have to look into the future. Scott, amazingly, as an executive, he brought out Kuminga because Kuminga, to me, clearly is the future of this organization. Now, at some point, you got to commit to the future and say, this young man is going to be a piece. Is he a top 3 guy? Is he the number 1 guy? I don't know any of that. But what I do know is he can do something in this league. Okay, the guy goes, 10 for 10 the other night or something like that?
Oh, he had a great game.
This guy
Yeah,
can do something.
exactly.
So he clearly now has moved up in the organization as far as he's going to be a core piece. When you look at this roster, and we're talking about the big 3, Steph is what, 35 now, 36?
35. Yep.
Clay, you know what? He's had a couple of injuries. Draymond now is, where he's at in his career, 33 or so, 34. Now you're looking at saying the $1 million question or the $1 billion question is, what are we going to do with Steph Curry? Is Steph Curry going to go through the rebuild or the retooling, as we like to call it now? Or are we going to begin to trade to try to piecemeal this thing and allow Steph Curry to be on the fringe as is and be in the 8th spot? Because no executive wants to just be tiptoeing into the playoffs every year, because the middle of the pack is probably the one place you don't want to be in this league as far as trying to rebuild or put together a team. So I think the question comes down to, Steph, what is it you really want to go through? I think that's what it comes down to. And if Steph wants to go through it, then they're going to have to make some trade with probably 1 or possibly 2 of their big 3 guys.
Right.
If not, if he doesn't want to go through it, at some point, you're going to have to figure out, and I don't think any executive wants to say, I was the guy who traded Steph Curry. I don't think anyone wants to say that. Okay, what he's done to that what he's done for that organization. But they are currently 4 or 5 games below 500. It doesn't look like it's getting any better. I don't think they have any wiggle room to really, and what can they possibly get back? So I think it comes down to, what is the realistic possibility for this group as is? And then from there, then they'll make the appropriate decisions or whatever it is, whatever direction they're going to decide to go in.
And Mo, let me just add this too. If you're sitting there at Golden State and you're assessing the rest of the Western Conference, look at the top of the Western Conference right now. Minnesota, younger basketball team. OKC, younger basketball team. We talked about Sacramento, younger basketball team. So you're going to be chasing those guys. And then you got Utah, who's ahead of you in the standings now. They're not at the top, but, again, younger. Yep. Houston, younger. So that's what you're up against. So that's what, to do a trade at the deadline, I mean, obviously Steph Curry would be somebody that would net you a lot, but you're not going to trade him.
No, but Clay and Draymond.
But Clay, yeah. But
Chris Paul's contract.
What? Yeah, here's Kanye. But what would that net you right now? See, that's the big question I would have, and I'm not so sure it would net you enough for you to make this huge run during the season. Maybe it does. Maybe this is a trade that comes up that we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks that I didn't foresee. But so it'll be interesting to see. They got a lot of tough decisions to make and ahead of them. So that's is what it is now.
The third team on my list, a little bit controversial. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are a team that needs to make a move, not to contend for a title this year, but I think the sooner that they make this move, the better. We spoke about it last week. We spoke about it even yesterday, BJ. The point guard situation with Darius Garland being out and Donovan Mitchell stepping into that role and playing great. When Darius Garland comes back and then you've got Donovan back at the 2, maybe you don't carry on winning games like you do right now. And then with Evan Mobley being out and Jarrett Allen playing amazing, it's another similar situation where you've got two guys who like to occupy similar areas, do similar things, and it just feels like with both of those positions, they might be better spaced in putting that talent elsewhere on the court in terms of a trade. I don't know which ones they'd move, and I think Donovan would be the more likely one to be moved because of the uncertainty that he brings to the franchise, with everyone always worried about him wanting to leave. But I think that move needs to be made in Cleveland, or you're just going to see it. You're going to see the move needing to be made when it's glaringly obvious to everyone in the face, where you will lose some leverage.
Great points. What I see and what we don't know is Cleveland right now, they're playing terrific basketball with Donovan at the point. So what are their internal conversations right now? They may see it, they may see it the same way that BJ sees it. That Donovan's got to be the point guard. And maybe they look at moving the other guy.
Yep.
But again, that decision probably won't occur until the off season.
Okay.
Because to your point, you got to know for sure what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell. You know, now if you can get him to agree to an extension, if that's the way you're leaning and he really likes it there and you want to keep him, then you may have to trade the other guard, assuming it doesn't work. Again, I think it's, we've seen a big enough sample size that there's a lot of concern with that small of a backcourt. Let's just be frank. They're both excellent players. But Darius Garland has been a little more injury prone than what Donovan has been. So I'm sure that will factor in. A young player like Mobley, I really like him and his talent. And I think he and Jared Allen can play together. Okay. We haven't seen the full scope of Mobley yet. I think this guy's he can develop into a good shooter, even out to the 3-point line. I watched this guy in college, highly skilled. Don't think that he's been utilized as much as I would have liked to see them be utilized.
Absolutely.
But they've been guard dominant and guard heavy. So trying to get that to work and
maybe clearing up that point guard position will help his game.
Or it could help his game a ton. So we have not seen him really with just the one guy or just playing with Donovan by himself.
Yeah, because like the amount that he gets used, the amount of touches and stuff is not what you would expect for a player who was picked at where he was picked and with his potential. So it's going to be interesting to see which teams decide to step up and make moves.